Man, Blizzard developers work fast. Just a couple of days ago, Jonas Costas told us that finding a mid-tier solution to the raid loot table, problems was going to be complicated because of several developer and coder and programmers issues in being able to actually make this change happen. And then a couple of days later, everything is scratched off because apparently we do have a change, which is going to go live. 33% more loot from raid bosses. 10-player raids are going to drop 2 items now, and 20-player raids are going to go back to drop 4 pieces of gear. So throughout all of the expansions and throughout all of the raid tiers, for all of the Zoomers that haven't played expansions back, all the way back to Wrath even, you used to get 5 or even 6 items. Even when we scaled down to 20-player raids and no longer 25-man player raids, you still could get up to 6 items. Sometimes, if some people were lucky, even 7. This is because back then the loot chance for the players, 20% per player, wasn't shared amongst other players, which means on average 20% per player meant that a raid of 20 should be getting around 4 items. But sometimes some people were lucky. Sometimes you wouldn't get 4 people out of 20 to roll 20% correctly. Sometimes you would just get 5, 6, or even 7 people to get a piece of gear. And then you had to consider they had bonus rolls. So literally sometimes you would see a boss die and see like 9 items being looted or even 10 items being looted. Nowadays, for Shadowlands, it's just been 3. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Blizzard thought this change would have worked because of the Great Vault and because they wanted, this was a decision they made before, because of the removal, essentially, of RNG, right? They stated right before Shadowlands launched that loot quantities overall are reduced in Shadowlands following the proclamation, "Let loot be loot." We are entering into a world without the W word and the T word, where getting an item from relevant content should feel rewarding on its own more often, without needing to hope for random upgrades. This was a commendable change. They didn't want people to step up on the treadmill, on the loot treadmill, and never step off. Every single time you get your mythic gear, remember that can also Titanforge. Remember that can also socket. Remember you got your mythic piece, but it doesn't have corruption. So every time there was always something that could have made your piece of gear better. So you always had a reason to do Mythic Plus, you always had a reason to do raids, and even in the absolute worst case scenario, like we have had, you even had reasons to do things like world quests. World quests were actually a possible source of loot upgrades. This was a very good system. Let me finish. This was a very good system for keeping people engaged in the content, i.e. making them play the game, spend time into the game. Because of course, every time they had more drive to enter and participate in PvE content, because it could always, even PvP content actually, because it could always Titanforge. It could always give you something surprising, right? Now, the bad part of the system is exactly the same. The bad part of the system is that you were being forced, if you wanted to keep improving the power of your character, to do this because it was basically a game of chance, a game of RNG, extreme RNG, because everything could give you this type of upgrades. Then you did want to do everything. I personally burned myself out by the middle of Legion when I was doing LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic of Emerald Nightmare, Trial of Valor, and Nighthold during Tomb of Sargeras, just because that increased your bad luck protection on finding a legendary, completing raid bosses. And that was just for the sake of the RNG chance of a legendary. So at the very least, Blizzard was able to identify this as a problem after many years and many months of people complaining about this RNG system. We did have some despicable casuals thinking that Titan Forging was good. Luckily, at least after 4 years, Blizzard decided to go away from Titan Forging. The problem is that they didn't replace the good part of Titan Forging. They got rid of what made Titan Forging and Warforging and corruptions and legendary random drop chance terrible. They got rid of it, so it's no longer in the loot table. Loot is back to being loot, it's back to being rare, it's back to being coveted. That's very good. Problem, why do you do Mythic Plus now? How good does it feel to raid if you haven't seen a single item in 6 weeks? That's the problem that they haven't fixed. It's the missing link that they haven't replaced. Their idea was clearly to supplement this with the Great Vault. Their idea was like, okay, you're getting much less loot from Mythic Plus, you're getting much less loot from raids, there is no more Titan Forging, so you're not getting loot from world quests, you're not getting loot from emissaries or any other source of random drop chances left and right, but at least now you get the Great Vault. And also remember, once you loot a 226 piece of gear, that's your piece of gear in that slot until the next raid tier. So the next raid tier, 9.1, next raid comes out in May. You loot a 226 from the Great Vault the 15th of December. You literally won't be swapping out that item until May, and you're in December, okay? So that is how powerful it is now to have a high item level piece of loot. So it did make sense to them to make it much more scarce, because of how long it can last you once you finally get it. It does seem like, however, that the frustration of not seeing enough, improvement on your character. After all, this is an MMO, but also an RPG. RPGs are cool because you start naked with some ragged cloth on you and a club, and then eventually you are level 150 Super Slayer, God Emperor, King of Mankind, full of golden armor. That's upgrading your character. It's what makes it feel cool. And if you go week after week after week getting fuck all, you start getting frustrated. Even though you know that once you get that piece of gear, it's gonna last you for 4 months. You know it will, but at the same time it feels bad because you have to go week after week after week not getting anything. So at the very least, Blizzard addressed this in Mythic Plus. They said, okay, you're still getting shit loot in Mythic Plus, we're not changing this, but now we are giving you Valor. So Valor is going to accomplish 2 things. Number 1, it's going to accomplish that it's going to give you the carrot. The carrot to put on the stick to give you a reason to do Mythic Plus. So now you are no longer annoyingly completing 4 Mythic Plus keys to get your 2 choices from the Great Vault, or 10 Mythic Plus keys to get 3 choices. Now you're also doing it because now you're getting Valor. So now you're doing it knowing that next Wednesday you can upgrade a piece of gear to 220. Or in 2 weeks you can upgrade it to 220. Something like this. The second reason is because now you do have, albeit to a tiny degree, you do also have, again, an interest in Mythic Plus gear. Because yes, Mythic Plus is scarce, and yes, it has a lower item level than Heroic, but now, when this patch will go live, you will be able to start looking at Mythic Plus gear as a potential 220 item level piece of gear. Because once you've got it, you know you can upgrade it. So you do have back the possibility of upgrades from Mythic Plus, and you have the guaranteed resource, Valor, that you can get from Mythic Plus. So this is going to give you back that sort of need, that sort of feel, that sort of calling towards doing Mythic Plus like you had before with Titan Forging and Corruption, without all the shitty parts of Titan Forging and Corruption, which was an unfair RNG system that could wildly spike the power of your character and you had no control whatsoever over it. Of course, some people, like myself, pointed out that, yeah, Mythic Plus is getting fixed. PvP was already doing just fine. Blizzard pointed it out themselves, that they were very happy with the PvP system. What all of this was causing is making it even more blatant that Raid was having problems. It was already worse than PvP, now it is likely going to get worse than Mythic Plus, so we needed some sort of solution for the Raid gear. This is possibly, likely, a band-aid solution. I still believe the bigger, wider change towards Raid loot and the loot system as a whole is going to come out in 9.1. There is no way, I don't think, Ion would go out of his way to tweet an answer to just a random guy telling him that it's going to be difficult to find a solution mid-tier for Raid loot, and then 2 days later announce this as if this was their solution. I don't think this is their solution. I think it's a band-aid. The band-aid is you're getting 4 items instead of 3. It just even sounds like a band-aid. Let's say that if you have a raid comp of 25 people, for example, which is perfectly reasonable, and you're killing 5 bosses per week, you're getting 5 items a week extra in a 25-man roster, which means you're gonna get 25 extra items every 5 weeks. So every month, every little over a month, you can guarantee 1 more piece of gear to your entire raid if you're killing at least 5 bosses. If you're killing, for example, 8 bosses, you can guarantee 1 more piece of gear per raid member every 3 weeks. So in a couple of months, everyone is gonna get 4 to 5 extra items, for example. Why I think it's a band-aid fix is because, number one thing called personal loot still exists. So the availability and the possibility of maximizing this extra piece of loot is still pretty scarce in raid systems. Number 2, the certainty is still lacking. PvP as a vendor, they have conquest and they can target whatever piece of gear they want. Mythic Plus now also can target not whatever piece of gear they want, but they can loot a wide variety of Mythic Plus pieces and then calmly, laid back, chill, decide which one they want to upgrade. Whereas for raids, it's just one more piece of gear. You're still tied to things like raid composition, how many players are there. You're still tied to things like loot table of bosses. You are still tied, another thing, to boss difficulty. Of course, saying you get one more piece of gear is good, but then again, there are going to be much less raiding guilds being able to clear the last 2, 3, or 4 bosses compared to the guilds that can clear the first 4, 5, or 6. So it's definitely not the same thing as the other two systems. It's not going to net you overall as much gear if you are not in the top end, so to speak. So I do think it is certainly a good change, as long as it's not the only one. I think it's a good change if it's the one to get people some more gear between 9.0.5 and 9.1 and to see how sort of, people react to the 4 items per boss and then maybe move from there. But I do expect something before 9.1. Something like a vendor, something like tokens similar to relics that are outside of the loot chance, personal tokens that don't interact with your chance to loot an item that you can trade in for raid gear. Essentially the exact same thing they are doing with other high-level content, just applied to raid systems. But looking at the comments, looking at the reactions of players, it made me wonder, how much time exactly do you think is the correct amount of time, the correct amount of weeks for a player to get full best in slot gear? Taking into consideration, of course, that without item forging and warforging and corruption, a piece of 226 item level means staying with you until the next release of the next tier. Very long shelf life on that piece of gear for you. How much time do you think it should take you to actually get that far? Because we have 16 item slots, okay? Let's just cut down to 15 because one is going to be a legendary. We could even say for 9.1 to cut 2 of them because you might even get 2 legendaries. That's gonna make the process go even faster, but let's not jinx it and just say you go down to 15. Let's bring it down to 14 because you're gonna get 1 BOE, Because we can say, as you watch my videos, you're a Chad who's certainly not poor and can afford at least 1 BOE, right? One of the cheap ones, like the bracers or the cloak, like one of those garbage pieces. So you have 14 pieces left you have to get. How long should it take you to get 14 pieces? Now, assuming at the very bare minimum, you do 4 Mythic Plus keys at a plus 14 to get a 226 option from the Great Vault, at least from the Mythic Plus. Let's even say you get one of the options from raids by pagging the easier bosses, right? So you get another option, or you are good at PvP, good enough at PvP to get another 226 options or some more. How long should it take you? Because if the answer is, I want to get 1 upgrade per week, that's gonna be 14 weeks, essentially. 14 items, 14 weeks. That's 3.5 months. The raid tier with the item level unlocked to its maximum released early in December. So 3.5 months is going to mean mid-April. So we're not even remotely close to that, and yet we have started seeing the complaints about the very, very low loot, the scarcity of loot, and people running multiple Mythic Plus and raid boss kills without loot early in January. If, according to people, they wanted 1 upgrade per week, they were expected to be done mid-April. That's way over 3 months from January, so it doesn't seem like people would have had that patience if they were already complaining in January. So what about 2 pieces? If you want 2 upgrades per week, that's gonna cut it down to 7 weeks to get your best in slot. 7 weeks is less than 2 months. Less than 2 months means you started first week of December to do the content and you are done the very first few days of February. So basically now, you're already reading this and in full best in slot. You are already 226. To put things in perspective, the first few days of February means you are part of one of the top 100 guilds in the world. You have killed an Atreus and you get Hall of Fame. That seems like a staggeringly fast speed to get best in slot. That is like the time where the 0.004% of the player base is Hall of Fame, top 100 ranked in the world for raids. That seems a little bit too fast. So maybe an in-between. Okay, 2 weeks is way too fast. 1 week, though, is mid-April. It's a bit too far away, man. The raid came out in December and I'm gonna finish in like April. Come on, a little bit faster, okay. 1.5. What about 1.5? 1 week, I get my upgrade from the Great Vault, but nothing from raids. The week after, I get my upgrade from the Vault and from the raid. The week after that, just from the raid and not from the Vault. And then The week after, I buy a BOE and I get nothing else. And the week after, I get a piece from the raid, a piece traded from the raid because another guy didn't need it, and nothing from the vault. You know, something like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 type of system. This should bring it down to about 10 weeks, 2.5 months, meaning 20th or so of February. So next week. That seems a little bit more reasonable. You can use that as a starting point. So the people who do the Mythic Plus keys at plus 14, at least up to 2 choices on the Great Vault, at least kill at least the first 4 to 5 Mythic bosses, should be able to be around there. People who do more should be a little bit faster. So people who are killing right now, something like 8 bosses in Mythic raiding, they have gotten past Sludge Fist, or they just get into Sludge Fist, so 7 to 8 bosses in Mythic every week, plus still the 2 options from Mythic Plus should probably get a few weeks earlier. And then people who do less, for example, people who don't Mythic raid, should be getting it a little bit later, because they are basically relying just on Mythic Plus. Of course, people who do Arena and not raid, for them it's the same as if they were raiding. Instead of getting 226s from raid bosses, they are getting it from Conquest. It's about the same. I think that would be a reasonable speed in which to get pieces of gear. Obviously, nowadays, this has definitely not been like this. It's definitely not been as quick. Remember that with 3 items per boss, you go, in the example I made, and kill every boss up to Sludge Fist. So you kill 7 bosses and you're getting 21 pieces of loot. That is barely enough to give 1 piece of gear per player every week. And that is only if every single player needs every single piece of loot that drops. And there is no duplicate, there is no piece that is outdated and unneeded, and you have a nice spread of mail, plate, leather and cloth to actually address and share all the possible loot. So even in the best case scenario of a guild that is at least 7 out of 10 mythic, which is still far ahead and also far above 95% of the player base, is only at best guaranteeing 1 piece of loot a week from raids, which means they are now relying on a good Great Vault option to get their second upgrade. So right now, even the better guilds, the better players in terms of content cleared, are barely in the 1 upgrade a week, in the 1 best in slot per week. Barely. So we are definitely lagging a little bit behind. The only people who have been steadily and readily at 1.5 upgrades per week in terms of speed, so people who could get to 226 by February, are the people who are doing Mythic Plus and Raid and Rated Arena and Battleground, the ones that could get the 226 also from their Conquest. Those are the only ones who were able to get ahead of the curve in terms of item level improvements. Which is also why so many people started turning their head and looking at the PvP system for gearing. As they were stuck in Mythic Plus and they were stuck in raids, they were like, wait a fucking second, I'm in the same guild as this guy, I raid the same thing he does, I even have more Raider IO than him, and do more Mythic Plus than him, but he has 4 item levels on me. And you look at the gear and he has 6 PvP pieces, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's the thing now. So I still think, not to be afraid that I have some sort of crusade against PvPers, that the PvP system is great for PvP players. The problem is the other systems that have been lagging behind. It is particularly confusing when Blizzard says they are very happy with the way the PvP system works. Because if they are very happy with the way the PvP system works, how have they looked at the raid system and thought it was good, right? That's the confusing part. Now, they have started to address it. I think it's good, the way Mythic Plus has been addressed. I think with some more community pushing and screeching and stomping their feet, Blizzard by 9.1, maybe at the very latest, mid 9.1, they will also add the plus 20 Mythic Plus key, giving 226, possibly, or, you know, the Mythic Raid equivalent eventually. So for Mythic Plus, I do think it's in a good place right now in terms of possible fixes. The Raid, I do think it's a band-aid, and the bigger solution is going to come later on, and we will have to wait and see, but for the moment, it is passable. It is a serviceable fix. So with this monologue, with this lengthy monologue about the loot system, I will have to leave you, because it's Saturday. You know, I have a horde of children to teach today. I have to show them a PowerPoint presentation on workout logs. I'm trying to teach them to use it properly, and not like the fucking apes they are. All they do is look at the numbers, and if they're not orange, they're not interested. They don't understand the purpose of workout logs. So I have to go back to my work. See you guys eventually, probably, likely, tomorrow. And in the meantime, we are actually getting snow again here. Damn.